Good morning everyone and welcome to the continuation of the lore blog post series in which we are currently looking at Asura Week. This whole series started with me in Guild Wars 1 playing through the dungeons that the expansion Eye of the North had to offer, and has kind of slowly transitioned into something where it's just me reading about the blog post and putting my own personal thoughts on it. The blog post for today is called That Old College Try. We've actually heard something from this before in the way of the story that is actually intersected throughout this blog post. I read it out for you. It was the story of an Asura named Delix, and now we're going to actually go back and listen to what the developer, in this case Rhys Soesbee, has to actually say about the race on a whole. This blog post, out of all, if you were just going to pick one blog post and not the others, this is probably the one that will give you the most in-depth look at the various aspects of what it means to be an Asura. So this is Rhys Soesbee talking to us about that. Rising up from their cities beneath the earth, the Asura prove time and time again the old adage, difficulty is just another word for opportunity. From their humble beginnings among the ruins of the Tarnished Coast, the Asura have risen to prominence. Their magical gates connect the major cities of Tyria, and their intelligence makes them an ally to be respected, or an enemy to be feared. This kind of hints, it jumps straight into the blog post here with a little bit of a hint at something we read about in the Movement of the World article, which was really the first main lore we got about Guild Wars 2. And that article all that time ago seemed to suggest that the Asura, through these Asura gates that they've built, which, in case you don't know, in case you've been living under a rock, these gates allow instantaneous travel for the races between the central hubs of each race's individual civilization, shall we say. So all of essentially the main cities are connected by these gates, and there are additional gates that go to other places too, such as Ebenhawk. And the Movement of the World kind of suggested that the Asura had snaked their way inside all of the other races and kind of had their claws over all the races in kind of a menacing way, that they were looming over everyone and they had access to everyone because they'd used their intelligence in these gates and they were going to try and manipulate people. That's since died down a little bit, but this blog post does open up in a similar way to that kind of reminds me of that. I don't know, maybe it doesn't remind or make anyone else think of that if you haven't read the Movement of the World all that time ago, but it's an interesting, I think, little reminder to some people of those original plans, which certainly seem to have died down slightly for the Asura now. Not to say that some Asura probably don't have intentions very similar to that. So the article really starts by talking about Prime Orders. This first paragraph mentions that the Asura rose from their humble beginnings among the ruins of the Tarnished Coast. Well, that wasn't really their beginnings. Their beginnings were underground. And I like that it mentions that there were ruins in the Tarnished Coast before, because I'm sure that there will be a lot of players in Guild Wars 2 who don't realise that. The Asura do obviously have their own structures and their own architecture, which, by the way, looks remarkably similar to the architecture that was already there in the Tarnished Coast. But when they rose to the surface, there were ruins here, and that's where they were. They were hiding in the ruins of a previous civilization. And hopefully when we get in game, we obviously haven't seen those areas of the game just yet, we will be able to have a look at these ruins for ourselves once again in Guild Wars 2 and potentially get a hint at who lived in them. But before they were there, they were underground. So this next section talks about Primordus, the Elder Dragon, who also happens to be underground. The coming of the Great Destroyer, the herald of the Elder Dragon Primordus, may have shocked the surface world, but it did far more damage below. Although a group of stalwart heroes had defeated the Herald and forestalled the Elder Dragon's awakening, its destroyers remained, and the damage they caused was titanic. These stalwart heroes, in case you didn't twig, they were the players from Guild Wars 1, and in particular, not just the players from Guild Wars 1, but the entire Dwarven race essentially transformed themselves to stone to bring down the Great Destroyer. And actually, the blog post does seem to mention that. The dwarves, responding to an ancient call, performed the rite of the Great Dwarf and turned themselves to stone in order to fight their age-old enemy. Yet they were not the only ones to fight against the destroyers in the deep caverns beneath the earth. Prior to the rise of the destroyers, the Asura were the predominant race in the depths of Tyria. They lauded their status over all others and fought primarily against the Script, creatures that the Asura considered, then and now, to be hideous, dangerous vermin. The destroyers were the first enemy in generations that had not fallen easily to the combined intelligence and magical prowess of the Asura. Their arcane council assumed that it was simply a matter of time before the destroyers were annihilated by Asuran skill and acumen. It was hubris that caused the downfall of their underground civilization. thousands of years to build, but only a handful of moments to vanish in the wake of the Elder Dragon's power. Now, if you've seen my other blog post episode where we read from the story that was in this very same blog post, you'll know that it talks a little bit about the Asura while they're underground. In fact, it talks a lot about the Asura while they're underground. Something I find very interesting that this paragraph here also kind of talks about is this whole civilization that was underground has now been essentially destroyed, right? So we could have this really interesting situation where in Guild Wars 2, and we can finally go back to the depths of Tyria. In Guild Wars 2, you can go in caves and stuff like that. You can go underground, but we should make it clear here that that is not the depths of Tyria. The depths of Tyria are far, far lower. If you imagine an intersection of an area of the world, and on top you've got the sky, then you've got the grass, then you've got the earth, then say you've got a cave beneath there, then say let's put another cave there, and then maybe even another, and then take that entire height that you've just built in your mind and drop it another layer down. That's what the impression I get of how low the depths of Tyria actually are. There was a place in Guild Wars 1 in Ascalon called the Catacombs, which are actually a returning dungeon in Guild Wars 2. But we learned about these catacombs that did seem to go very, very, very deep in Guild Wars 1. And very, very recently, in a new update to the game, we found that far beneath those, even further, then there are more caves, and that is the depths of Tyria. And we're now talking so low that there's like lava and stuff down there. So it doesn't look like in Guild Wars 2, despite the fact we can go underground, getting to the true depths of Tyria that were discovered in Guild Wars 1 that the Asura lived in, actually doesn't seem to be on ArenaNet's plans right now, particularly considering that one of the Elder Dragons is down there and patrolling down there. And I suppose when we get an expansion that deals specifically with that Elder Dragon, then we'll be able to go and explore down there to a greater capacity than we will at launch. But in any case, I'm excited about finally going there because they could really litter these places with the ruins of the Asura. In Guild Wars 1, when you went down there, you did find there were a lot of massive chambers that seemed to have built by previous races. None of it was Asuran architecture, so in Guild Wars 1 we never actually found these Asuran ruins or previous cities to Ratasum that existed underground. We never found that kind of stuff in Guild Wars 1. But we did find that there were a lot of races that seemed to have lived down there at some point and either left or been destroyed while down there. And it's just a very, very cool place. And I can't wait for in Guild Wars 2 to find the aftermath of all of these Asura being destroyed. And in fact, we do have another story that talks about some heroes going to one of these underground cities called Rata or something else. I can't quite remember the name, which is really, really quite cool. So we do know that they're there. But yeah, so it was hubris that caused the downfall of their underground civilization. They thought they could beat the Destroyers, and they were fools. Yet the defeat of the Great Destroyer did not prevent the eventual awakening of the Elder Dragon, only delayed it. Approximately 50 years after his herald was defeated, so 50 years really after Guild Wars 1 ended, Primordus awakened. He was the first Elder Dragon. This time, he awakened for good. Its minions now spread through the depths, eradicating many subterranean races whose names are now only known through Asuran records and tales. The races which survived the constant battles were forced to leave behind their deep-dwelling cities and rebuild closer to the surface. I love this idea that we'll eventually be able to find these records and tales and learn about all these cool races, and what will be even more bizarre is you could go into the first game and know that somewhere beneath your feet the soon-to-be extinct races were still alive. That would be a really weird feeling. I really want to learn more about what was going on down there, because right now we only have really a lot of lore about two of the races, and that would be the Asura and the Skrit from the underground. By this time, the Asuran refugees had already established themselves on the surface. They were regrouping and recreating their culture in this new world, building the city of Ratasum. And don't forget, Ratasum was actually originally built among the ruins of someone else. So the next section is called the Arcane Council. So we've kind of learned how they moved out from underground. The Arcane Council were mentioned a little bit earlier. From time immemorial, Asura have been builders and inventors, utilizing magic as other races use simple tools. Think of the contrast here between Asuran technology and Char technology. Although not as old a race as the dwarves, they were a far more active one, spending their time on constant invention, experimentation, and the dissection of magic itself. According to the records of the eldest archivists of their race, there were at least 6 cities as large and as grand as Ratasum in the Asura-dominated lands beneath the surface, though none survived into the modern age. Okay, if you guys haven't got a very clear picture of what that might mean, Asuran civilization was underground, I ask you you to watch the video on the Guild Wars 2 main website that just showcases the Asuran race. That shows you a lot of Ratasum, a lot of the kind of trailer footage of Ratasum and more stuff. You will see how big that place is. Or do yourself a favour and look at a Guild Wars 2 in-game map of the new map, and you can see like a giant pyramid on the map, marked massive. You can see it all the way zoomed out on the Tarnished Coast. That will give you an idea of how big Ratasum actually is, and the idea that there were 6 of these things, possibly pyramids themselves, that would be pretty cool, or 6 massive cities, no matter how the Asura chose to build them, deep underground, is fascinating to me, and I'd love to find the ruins of them. I really, really would. Hell, I'd love to see them while they were still in action as well, just as much, but that's not going to be a possibility, really, in Guild Wars 2. But yeah, there were at least 6 cities as large and grand as Ratasum in the Asuran-dominated lands beneath the surface, though none survived in the modern age. While the other races insist that the legends of such massive capitals as Korasum are far-fetched and exaggerated, the Asura tersely reply that the other races are simply too dim to comprehend the grandeur that they lost. So I suppose, you know, if some people don't believe it, maybe there is a hint that perhaps there weren't 6, maybe there were a few less. It's one of those examples where a race might be bigging themselves up. Quite cool. I like to see that kind of stuff going on in the story. The Asura are led by the Arcane Council, a brain trust that is said to be comprised of the best and brightest minds in the nation. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is that most Asura are far more interested in being inventors than bureaucrats, and the Arcane Council is all too often made up of those who ran the slowest when an opening was announced. The current Arcane Council rules from the city of Ratasum and is led by High Councillor Flax. Among his cabinet are prestigious inventors, well-known diplomats, and the deans of each of 3 Asuran colleges. Here's an interesting thought for you guys. Guild Wars 2 pushes a lot the fact that now there are 5 races, obviously, but mainly when we're looking at the humans, the writers will always drag your attention to the fact that humanity in Tyria, at least in that continent Tyria, has fallen. That it was once all over the land, and it was the prevalent race across the Tyrian continent, and now they have fallen back, and now they have only Divinity's Reach. This is their last city, and the other races are seen in some ways as being conquerors of these new lands, and that they haven't been pushed back as much. But really, when you look at it, the Asura might have suffered, and the Norn as well to a degree, just as much as humans have. Now the Asura only have Ratasum. They once had 6 damn cities and an entire civilization existing under the ground, and that's all been lost. They have just 1 city now. So in one way, you could say that the Asura have lost just as much as the humans, but there's never much attention brought to that because they are now seen as interlopers in a new land, which is an interesting thought to me. I like to think that all the races, except the Char, which I think is so fitting of the Char, all the races have really lost something at some point. I mean, the Sylvari, I suppose, are just this massive, in some ways, far more conquering force than the Char, at the rate of the fact that they don't seem to even die of old age at this point, and there's just more and more and more of them coming to the world at a really rapid rate. So I suppose the Sylvari are pegged to be the big conquerors soon enough. But right now, I mean, certainly the humans aren't alone in what they've lost. They really aren't. I don't think we should forget that. Among the Arcane Council's cabinet are prestigious inventors, well-known diplomats, and the deans of each of the 3 Asuran colleges. All Asura begin as apprentices in their parents' laboratories, assisting with various projects from the moment they can stand on their own, or lean against a crystalline transmogrifier. Where they reach an age where they are arguing with their parents more than they are helping, which is usually fairly young, they are apprenticed to an Asura master with one of the 3 colleges. The master is responsible for the student's education up until the time they graduate and join a crew of their own. Through this traditional apprentice system, adolescent Asura gain a well-rounded education, and their advisors receive unpaid, if not always perfectly competent, laboratory interns. Even after they complete their indenture, Asura often hold fierce loyalty towards their alma masters, often claiming that the magical theories of one are the basis of the other 2. So there's quite a lot of lore that's been established for the Asura to do with their education system, which I think is really cool, and I like that ArenaNet spent their time doing that, considering such a defining aspect of the Asuran race is their intelligence, right? That's a big part of the Asura. They're smug and they're intelligent and they have good reason for it. So while other races, like humans, even humans, we played them that much in Guild Wars 1, but we've never really had ArenaNet sit down and explain to us their education system, or even the education system of just one nation, and especially not with Guild Wars 2's lore at this point. We just haven't had that much, and the same could be said for most races, really. They don't seem to go into much detail. I'd say, really, one of the races that we have the most detail on are the Char at the moment, because we've learnt about their Pharahs, and that's kind of how they're raised and how early they end up in their warband. But the Asura get all of this sort of established on how they work and how they've learnt what they know and how they continue to invent, and it's just very, very cool. I like that they spent the focus and the time here for this particular race, because it's if you were going to do it with any of them, you'd have to do it with these guys. So let's learn about crews. The cultural system of the Asura is both highly organised and extremely flexible. Their society consists of individuals who come together to accomplish greater tasks. This is their crew system. A project will form and the leader will call together or hire those most useful or capable until the project's finished. An Asura's crew is usually temporary, lasting as long as the project requires, and then breaking up when they've completed whatever task they were performing. These crews often stay in touch, forming and reforming with individuals they know and respect, and avoiding those whom they don't get along with or find substandard. Because Asura are judged by their reputation and craftiness, they often choose a speciality within their college training. An Asura will seek to be well known as the first and foremost authority on that topic, in the hopes of acquiring position on cutting-edge crews, performing greater and more challenging tasks. We also learned in a previous blog post during Asura Week how much family means to the Asura, and if people are substandard, that can affect everyone else in the family too. So this is also something to consider while joining crews. Also, something very cool about the crews is this isn't just sort of an Asura with Asura thing. This is how the Asura tackle life. It's not just when with the Asura, this is kind of how we work things. You'll find Asura, and all you have to do is read the first chapter of the first novel to know that Asura will form crews with anything they do, whether they're with other Asura or not. You're introduced to that story with an Asura forming a crew with people from many different races. It's just how they know to do things, and they don't bat an eye at introducing the system to other races, which I think is very, very cool. So you as a human could be in a crew. You as a Char could be in a crew. It's kind of interesting. I wonder what the Asura think of the Char system with their warbands, and whether they consider them to be slightly similar to crews. Of course, warbands are together for life, and they in a way become your family, while crews obviously always join up and split up, and only some people stay together, and as it says here, tend to be very flexible. So the blog post talked a little bit about these colleges, but hasn't really explained much. Well, that's what the next section's on. There are 3 colleges. There is the College of Statics, the College of Dynamics, and the College of Synergetics. And when creating Asura, you will get to choose which of these colleges you went to. And don't forget, when you're in that college, you will probably claim that your college is the greatest college and the other 2 colleges couldn't exist without it. So let's learn about the College of Statics first. Those Asura who join the College of Statics are builders, and they build to last, specialising in permanent structures and large-scale projects, like Ratsum maybe. These Asura tend to be more conservative and cautious in nature. They believe in measuring twice, cutting once, and measuring again. They are thoughtful and analytical, and enjoy research as well as practical application. Prominent graduates of the college include the inventors of the magico-magnetic levitation stones, which the Asura use as power sources for the larger structures. They refer to their college as a concrete thing, a living formation of rock and structure that is continually added to and subtracted from by the works of alumni and students alike. These Asura make construction golems, drilling machines, and anything else that solidly moves. They are the hubs within the Eternal Alchemy, the solid foundation of posts, supports and axles upon which the cogs can turn. An example of a couple of the creations from the College of Statics include positional relays, quasi-enchantment aligners, theosphacy scopes, meta-survey incantations, cross-incantation braces, and levitation buttresses. Do any of those things mean anything to you? No, probably not, because the Asura like to name things big and complicated. But yeah, so obviously as I'm reading this out, if you want to play an Asura, you might want to be thinking which of these suits you more. So I kind of think of the College of Statics as sort of the more practical guys. If you were in the College of Statics, you could walk around Ratasum and I suppose feel a sense that, yeah, it was my people that built this place. It's us that have left our mark on Tyria. Without the College of Statics, what would the Asura be? They wouldn't have anything to show for themselves. They wouldn't have any structures or anything like this. Not large structures anyway. So this giant floating pyramid that is Ratasum, you can thank its actual practical creation on the College of Statics. The second college, the College of Dynamics. The Asura of the College of Dynamics are best understood as the gizmo makers. These are the masters of swift, innovative problem solving. They tend to produce items that last only as long as they are necessary in order to make the next intuitive leap. They are energetic, enthusiastic, and impulsive, tending to start projects before researching the possible results. They love to figure out how other races do things in order to appropriate and improve upon that magical theory for their own purposes. When I read this line, by the way, it just makes me think of how the Char invented guns from the old dwarven keg powder technology, and then the Asura probably saw that and were like, oh, this is an interesting concept, and then made like their magic phasers, which I think is absolutely brilliant. That's not official lore, that's just kind of the way I view that whole thing to have turned out. An experiment is only a failure, their advisors say, if you don't learn anything from it. When a member of the college speaks with his alma mater, they typically are speaking of the body of work, experiments, and thought that form a mental picture of the college's achievements, the overall innovations that they've provided to the world. In the Eternal Alchemy, they are most often referred to as the tooth gears and the mainsprings of the universe. I've just noticed really that this blog post doesn't talk much about the Eternal Alchemy. If for anybody particularly confused about what this might be, it's the Asura's belief system. The Norns believe and revere the spirits of the wild. The Char choose to put faith in nothing except for Char might. The humans have faith in their gods, and some humans are losing faith in their gods, as you know. The Asura believe in a more abstract concept, which is that of the Eternal Alchemy, which is the idea that everything in this world is just a cog in a great machine, a big metaphorical machine. And the image I usually get is of just like a giant wall with loads of cogs and things whirring and spinning on it, and this is kind of how the Asura view life. They think of life as a machine that can be tampered with and changed, and you can have an impact on these cogs. Everybody could represent a cog, and everything you do moves the world in some way. Things that other races might see as gods, the Asura would simply say is a large cog in the Eternal Alchemy, and that's really their belief system. So that's what it's referring to when it talks about how each of these different colleges kind of play into that. There's some examples of creations from the College of Dynamics are canoptic enhancers, lunographic fasteners, torque abjurers, enigmaticons, karmic pressure gauges, kinetic spell churns, and magiphysical armatures. Again, I have no idea what any of them are, but you can compare College of Statics, which were the original ones, as the big builders of big stuff, to the College of Dynamics, who build little gizmos and stuff like that. Stuff like you'd expect to see in James Bond, all that kind of thing. The little gloves that you're probably going to see Asura wear, and all kinds of those little gadgets and tricks. You can put that down to the College of Dynamics. So I guess it depends what you really prefer the idea of your little Asura actually creating. Finally, the College of Synergetics. Within the College of Synergetics, Asura are all about shaping energy and building connections. Here you can find the more mystical thinkers, those who study the raw matter of magic itself and disdain for the solidity of the functional world. They are often more philosophical in bent and are very used to dealing with political and social theory. These Asura are interested in how patterns form, how errors propagate, and how chaos forms rational systems. Unfortunately, this dedicated study to psychology also leads them to be more secretive, even among themselves, as they believe they know how everyone else's mind works, and those minds are out to get them. Even the greatest of this college's alumni can tend to be a little short-sighted, devising ethereal plans and constructing psychological reasoning without actually venturing out of their laboratories for concrete tests. When a member of the college speaks of his alma mater, they typically are speaking of the social structures they've created through their tutelage, their connections, and the body of Asura who consider themselves a college of like minds. Creations, therefore, from these guys, I suppose, are more few and far between, though the knowledge, this is the way I see it, the knowledge that these guys gain from all their theorizing actually probably goes to help the other two colleges invent the stuff that they did in the end, but they do have some of their own creations, such as quantagrams, dipolar spell matrices, conjuration vertices, presumistic readouts, mogenic control rods, and self-restraining enchant loops. So really ask yourself, which of these would you prefer to go to? If you're looking for my opinion, I like what synergetics stand for, with thinking more about the bigger things, the philosophical debates and stuff they probably have, but I don't like that they don't really invent much stuff. And then if you are asking me, well, out of the two really inventing, it's not fair to say that dynamics and statics invent while synergetics don't. That's totally not true. Synergetics do invent too, but I just feel like on an impact of the scale of inventions of things, dynamics and statics probably have a bit more. But what do I prefer? The idea of being a member of someone who created the giant floating pyramid and stuff like that, or small little tricks and stuff that really define what an Asura looks like when you find him, like with his little goggles and stuff. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. So I'm gonna chicken out of this and say I'm not sure which one I'd want to join, and I'll probably spend quite a while in character creation trying to make this decision. I can tell you that much. Alright, so the actual article ends, the blog post ends with something on the Inquest. Now, the Inquest are like the negative faction of the Asura, which are quite an interesting band, so let's listen. Although not actually a college, the Inquest is the largest crew in Asuran culture, and is a relatively new organisation. Alright, so get this into your head. It's not a college, like we just heard. We heard the three main colleges, but this is a crew that's become so large it's comparable to a college, and it exists outside of Ratasum. So I get the impression that Asura kind of have the choice. You as a player won't have this choice, but the Asura kind of have a choice. Do I stick around in Ratasum and learn things from these people, which we will find can be inhibited in their approaches, because Asura do have, at the end of the day, some baseline of ethics and certain experiments that they won't do on certain things? Or do you leave Ratasum, become a bit of an outcast, and go to what is known as the Inquest, which is a large crew that you can essentially look at as a college, because it will teach you a lot about the world and experiments that other Asura would dare not do. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but okay, let's see what the blog post says about them. Sorry. Where traditional Asura training goes through an apprenticeship at one of the three colleges, the Inquest has become a system of corporate training that is structured rather like a series of progressive aptitude tests. When an Asura can pass a test, she is immediately given the... See, look at this. Anyone who watched my dungeon series knows that this kind of irks me whenever she does it. Rhys Osby, she never uses like the default... She always says she. She always assumes everything's a she. And I'm not sexist, I don't have a problem with that, but it always jerks me out of the moment whenever I read she, because it's not a normal thing to do. Though I do appreciate the effort she's probably trying to make that a normal thing. Anyway, sorry, that's completely off topic. When an Asura can pass a test, she is immediately given the next, and her clearance among the Inquest is upgraded accordingly. This leads to a great deal of cheating, of course, for and against the aspirants. An Asura never graduates from the Inquest as they do from the other colleges of the Asura. Once you join the Mega Crew, you're a member for life, even if the other Inquest members are forced to make sure that life is a necessarily short one. So if you go in, you're not getting out. An aspirant is given a crew assignment and expected to work on their individual task regardless of whether they understand that task's purpose in the greater schema. They sacrifice their own desires for the greater good of the Inquest's body of knowledge, like it or not. The Inquest combines the strengths of the various college disciplines, but they only use what they need, abandoning deeper understanding of those theories in favour for quick and profitable return. They are more than willing to burn out their young inventors, souring them on their work, rather than waste time with rest and unprofitable accounting of time. Unlike the three Asuran colleges, which delight in sharing newly completed discoveries, if only to victoriously rub them in one another's faces, the Inquest do not share their information beyond the Inquest itself. Indeed, they occasionally even go so far as to sabotage the promising research of the college crews that impinges upon what the Inquest see as proprietary design. Whether colleges see power as a useful tool towards understanding the eternal alchemy, the Inquest sees power as a goal in and of itself. Inquest founders looked upon the amount of knowledge lost when Cora Sum was wiped out by the Destroyers and judged such a signal drop to be complete anathema to their purposes. Gathering information in its pure, crystalline form is their intention, and they will stop at nothing less than the sum of all knowledge. Indeed, the ultimate goal of the Inquest research is to achieve control of the eternal alchemy, and with it, all of Tyria. And that's how the blog post ends. A couple of things I'd like to add. There have been other sources that talk more about the inquest in various ways. One particular thing to bear in mind is the inquest don't necessarily consider themselves to be evil. In fact, in a lot of ways, you could consider them to be allies in that they appreciate the Elder Dragon threat. The ultimate goal is, I suppose, an evil one, to control all of Tyria, which I suppose is the ultimate goal, really, when you get down to it, of all Asura. They want to become, like, masters of the universe, shall we say. But these guys have, like, really driving towards that in quite an unethical way. But that's their goal, and right now, the Elder Dragons are these the most big, powerful cogs that are out there. So the Inquest's goals in some ways are still aligned with that of the players, in that they want to destroy the Elder Dragons as well, or at least manipulate them in some way. So you could expect in the game at some point to have to like go with a meeting for the Inquest to find what they've learned. Something I like to think about here is they establish two simple facts here, which if you don't put them together you might miss something. Fact number one, Asura working in the Inquest do not necessarily know what exactly it is that they're working on in the greater scheme, right? Fact two, the Inquest do not divulge the information that they've learned to other places. So you've got a structure here where only the people in the very high end of the Inquest actually know what they're doing and actually have the sum of knowledge. And you could even have a situation where it's just like one or maybe two people at the very head of the Inquest that are slowly learning a great deal about Tyria and the universe, potentially devastating information. We've seen the kind of thing races can do with magic when they've invented their own or they've got it from someplace. Look at the Massat and Spectral Agony and what they could do to cloak themselves from everyone that just could not be penetrated without the help of the gods in some way, right? You can do a lot with magic, and you can do a lot with knowledge, and it's set up this idea here that there are just a few Asura that are running this huge scheme, this huge thing, the Inquest, and they're just being fed knowledge through this whole chain, and they're getting more and more and more, and it could be getting to a very dangerous point where they know a lot and no one else knows what they know, and it could get to the point where no one can stop them from what they do know. So very interesting. I like to think of what's going to be happening with the Inquest. And really, those are the guys like the Sons of Svarnir, like the White Mantle for the humans, like the Separatists for the humans, like the Flame Legions for the Char, and on and on and on. These are really, in gameplay terms, the reason why these guys are here, you could say, is so that the players have got a chance to fight Asura themselves, which could be quite cool. But there you go, guys. That's the blog post. Obviously, really, that's only half of the blog post. The other half was made up from this story to do with Dlix. If you haven't seen that, I'll probably leave a link in the description. Why not haul myself out a little bit? You can listen to that if you want. I particularly like the Dlix story. And yeah, are we done with Asura Week now? I think we might be. There is a... See, this is the thing, right? They've got a blog post on animating the Asura, but it doesn't go much into the lore. It just explains that when you've got a very small race, you've got to try and make them not look ridiculous and fit into the Guild Wars aesthetic, which is kind of grounded in realism. So instead of trying to make it look realistic, they realised that was going to be very difficult to have these very small Asura run very fast all the time and make these massive jumps and leaps in the combat system. So they made the Asura have more of a light-hearted approach with their animations and stuff, and that's kind of how the Asura evolved into what they are in Guild Wars 2, which is very different to what they were in Guild Wars 1 in terms of their style and their visual aesthetic. But really it doesn't go into lore that much at all, so we won't read that one, but that was a part of Asura Week. If you want to do that, then you can just go to September 2011 on the ArenaNet blog post. That's where all of these things came from, by the way. And yeah, that's Asura Week done. I do have one more blog post which you will be seeing tomorrow. I hope I upload these in order. You'll be seeing one more tomorrow, which was the last lore post we really had. Well, the latest one was Jotun, but I've already read that one out. The last one is actually called Planet of the Grawl, and it talks about one of the lesser races in Guild Wars 2, the Grawl, which is fantastic. And that is literally the last lore post, really, like flat out on a race that we've had for a very long time. So, and that will be all of them done on my channel. Like I said, the other ones were on the Dungeon series, which you can find on as a playlist. In fact, I think this video will be in that same playlist on the channel. But anyway, there you go, guys. I hope you've learned a lot about the Asura this week, and yeah, maybe that's swayed your decision on which playable character you actually want come the game's launch. Yeah, as I've said before, my favourite is probably the Asura. So these are the guys I'll be playing, likely on my main. Whether that'll be on the Let's Play that I'm playing them as, I don't know just yet. But yeah, I'll stop rambling. Thanks very much for watching, guys. As I said, I hope you enjoyed it, and I guess I will see you tomorrow for the Grawl and some more Guild Wars 2 Daily. I will see you next time.